If you've ever wondered how it feels to attend your own funeral while you're still breathing, then stay with me. Because I lived something even stranger. I watched my own daughter smile at hundreds of guests who believed I had been dead for years, while I sat quietly in the last row, holding an invitation she never intended for me to receive. My name is Eleanor Brooks. I'm 72 years old, and this is the story of the day my heart broke for the second time. The first time happened 24 years earlier. People often tell you that time heals everything. They lie. Time teaches you how to carry pain without dropping it. That's all. Every morning I still wake up at 6, just as I did when my daughter Lily was little. I still make 2 cups of tea before remembering there is no one sitting across from me anymore. Old habits don't disappear. Neither does love. I raised Lily alone after my husband Daniel died in a construction accident when she was only 4 years old. Everyone said I was too young to become a widow. No one mentioned I was too young to bury my dreams. I worked wherever someone would hire me. I cleaned hotel rooms until my knees swelled. I washed dishes until my hands cracked every winter. I stitched clothes late into the night while Lily slept beside me because I couldn't afford a babysitter. Whenever she asked why I was always tired, I'd kiss her forehead and say, "Dreams cost something, sweetheart. I'm just paying for yours." She would giggle and wrap her tiny arms around my neck. "When I grow up, I'll buy you the biggest house in the world." I laughed every single time. I don't need the biggest house. What do you need? You. Back then, that answer was enough. Years passed like pages turning too quickly. Lily became beautiful. Brilliant. Ambitious. She earned scholarships. She made friends whose parents owned companies instead of mop buckets. I noticed the changes slowly. At school events she stopped introducing me first. When classmates walked over, she'd suddenly become busy. She asked me not to wear my old coat because it looked too worn. I smiled and bought a new one from a thrift store. She never realized it wasn't new. One evening, just before leaving for college, she hugged me tightly. "I'll make you proud. You already have. I'll come home every weekend. I'll be waiting." For the first few months, she did. Then weekends became once a month. Once a month became holidays. Holidays became phone calls. Phone calls became text messages. Eventually, silence. At first I made excuses. She's studying. She's busy. She's building her future. A mother can convince herself of almost anything if it protects her heart. Then one afternoon I traveled 3 hours by bus to surprise her on campus. I carried homemade apple pie. Her favorite. I found her outside the library laughing with a group of friends. Before I could wave, one girl asked, "Who's that lady?" Lily looked straight at me. Straight into my eyes. For one tiny second, I saw panic. Then she smiled politely. "Oh, she's someone from my hometown." Someone. Not mom. Not mother. Someone. I stood there holding that warm pie while something inside me turned cold forever. I never walked over. I quietly placed the pie on a nearby bench and returned to the bus station. The pie came home with strangers. I came home with tears. Months later, I received a short letter. No return address. No explanation. Just 6 lines. "Mom, please don't contact me anymore. I'm starting a different life. People here wouldn't understand where I came from. It's easier this way. I hope someday you'll forgive me. Lily." I read those words until the paper became soft from my hands. I wanted to hate her. Instead, I worried whether she was eating enough. That's the curse of being a mother. Love survives where pride cannot. Years rolled on. Birthdays passed. Christmas dinners stayed untouched. Every year I wrapped one present anyway. Every year I wrote her name on the tag. Every year I placed the unopened gift in the attic. Neighbors stopped asking about my daughter. Eventually they assumed she lived overseas. I let them believe it. The truth hurt too much to repeat. Then, 24 years later, everything changed because of a letter that wasn't addressed to me. The mailman knocked on my door. "Wrong mailbox again," he laughed. I looked down. The envelope belonged to the woman next door. It had slipped into my box by mistake. I was about to return it when one sentence printed across the elegant invitation caught my eye. "The wedding of Lily Brooks." My hands began to tremble. Lily. My Lily. Getting married. I stared at the gold lettering until the words blurred. Then my eyes stopped on another line. The bride's parents. Father. Late Richard Carter. Mother. Late Margaret Carter. Late. I blinked. Read it again. Late Margaret Carter. I whispered the words aloud. They buried me. Without a grave. Without a goodbye. Without asking if I was ready to disappear. I wasn't simply forgotten. I had been replaced. Declared dead. By the little girl who once promised she would never leave me. That night. I made a decision. If the world believed I was dead, then perhaps a ghost deserved one last visit. What would you do if the child you carried for 9 months erased you from the world with a single sentence? Would you stay home and cry, or would you walk into the room where everyone believed you no longer existed? I chose to walk in. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted one last chance to see my daughter smile, even if that smile was no longer meant for me. The wedding was only 5 days away. For the first 2 days, I barely slept. I kept taking the invitation out of my apron pocket, smoothing its edges with my fingers as if touching the paper could somehow erase the words that had cut so deeply. Late Margaret Carter. I whispered them over and over until they sounded like someone else's name. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lily at 5 years old, running barefoot across our tiny backyard with dandelions in her hands. "Mommy, these are for you." She had looked so proud, even though half the flowers had already fallen apart. I still kept one of those dried dandelions inside an old photo album. Funny how children give you flowers before they learn how to give you scars. The morning before the wedding, I climbed into my attic. Dust floated through the sunlight like tiny memories refusing to settle. Every cardboard box held another piece of Lily's childhood. Her first pair of red shoes. The teddy bear she refused to sleep without. A drawing she'd made in 2nd grade. It showed a little house with 2 stick figures. One was much taller than the other. Above the taller figure she'd written, "My mom." Above the smaller one, "My best friend." I pressed the drawing against my chest. When did I stop being both? I whispered into the empty room. No answer came. Only silence. Silence has a way of becoming the loudest sound in an old house. Then I found another box. 24 birthday presents. Every single one wrapped neatly. Every single one unopened. A knitted scarf. A silver bracelet I had saved months to buy. A recipe book filled with all her favorite meals. Letters. Dozens of letters. None of them mailed. I had always hoped one day she would come home. I wanted to hand them to her myself. Hope can be foolish. But without it, old people stop waking up. I carried one small package downstairs. It was the first music box I'd ever bought for her. She had been 7 years old. Every night she'd wind it before bed. The tiny ballerina inside would spin while she pretended she was dancing on a great stage. She used to laugh so hard that the neighbors could hear. That laugh had once filled every corner of my house. Now even remembering it hurt. I wrapped the music box in fresh paper. Not because I believed she'd accept it. Because mothers don't know how to stop giving. The next morning, I stood in front of my closet for nearly an hour. There wasn't much to choose from. Just a handful of dresses worn to church, funerals, and grocery shopping. I finally picked a navy blue dress Daniel had bought me on our 10th anniversary. The zipper almost refused to close. I smiled. So we've both gotten older. I brushed my silver hair carefully. For the first time in years, I put on a little lipstick. Not to look beautiful. Just to look alive. As I locked my front door, my neighbor, Mrs. Harris, called from across the fence. "Margaret. You look lovely today. Going somewhere special?" I hesitated. Then smiled. "I'm going to see someone I love. I hope they know how lucky they are." So do I. The drive to the city felt longer than 24 years. Every mile carried another memory. The little diner where Lily loved pancakes. The park where she'd learned to ride her bicycle. The bookstore where she'd begged me for novels I couldn't afford. I remembered selling my wedding ring just to buy her textbooks during her first year of college. I never regretted it. A ring is only gold. A daughter's future is priceless. Or so I believed. By the time I reached the church, guests were already arriving. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Women stepped out wearing elegant gowns that probably cost more than everything inside my little house. Men laughed loudly, adjusting expensive suits and polished watches. I suddenly felt invisible. Perhaps I already was. No one looked twice at an old woman carrying a small gift wrapped in faded blue paper. I walked slowly toward the entrance. Near the door stood a large framed photograph. Not of the bride. Of her family. Lily stood beside a distinguished-looking older couple. Richard and Margaret Carter. The parents she had borrowed. She smiled at them exactly the way she used to smile at me. There wasn't a single picture of Daniel. Not one of our tiny home. Not one memory of the life we had shared. It was as though someone had taken scissors to history. A young woman greeted arriving guests. "Welcome. Bride or groom's side?" I swallowed carefully. "The bride." She smiled politely. "And your name?" For a heartbeat, I almost said it proudly. "Margaret Brooks. Lily's mother." Instead, the words caught in my throat. "Margaret." She searched a list. I don't see your name. I won't stay long." She glanced at the growing line behind me. "It's fine. There are a few extra seats in the back." The back. How fitting. I thanked her and stepped inside. The church glowed with white roses and soft candlelight. Everything looked perfect. Exactly the kind of wedding Lily used to describe when she was little. She would wrap an old blanket around herself and pretend it was a bridal gown. "Mommy, you'll sit in the front row." I wouldn't miss it for the world. She had kept half of that promise. I was there. Just not where she'd imagined. I slipped quietly into the very last pew. No one noticed. The organ began to play softly. Guests turned toward the front, chatting excitedly. Then I overheard two women behind me. "The bride's story is so heartbreaking." "I know. Imagine losing your mother when you were a teenager." "Poor thing. I heard her adoptive parents practically saved her life." The first woman sighed. "God truly blessed that girl after all she'd been through." I lowered my eyes. They weren't cruel. They simply believed the story they had been told. A story where I had died. A story where someone else had become the hero. I wanted to stand. To shout. "I'm alive." But what would it change? A wedding isn't the place for a mother to defend her existence. So I remained silent. Then the church doors opened. Everyone stood. Music filled the room. And for the first time in 24 years, I saw my daughter. She looked radiant. The little girl who once danced with a music box had become a breathtaking bride. For one impossible moment, my heart forgot everything. I smiled through tears. My beautiful girl. Then she lifted her eyes. She looked toward the crowd. Her gaze swept across the church. Past strangers. Past friends. Past family. Until it landed on the last row. On me. The color drained from her face. Her bouquet slipped from her trembling fingers. And the entire church fell into a silence so deep that everyone turned to see what had frightened the bride. Have you ever seen someone look at you as if they had just seen a ghost? Not because they believed in ghosts, but because they had spent years convincing the world you were one. That was the look on my daughter's face. The music stopped. The pianist's fingers froze over the keys. A whisper spread through the church like wind through dry leaves. What happened? Is she all right? Why did she drop her bouquet? Lily stood at the entrance, completely still. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She wasn't looking at the groom. She wasn't looking at her guests. She was looking only at me. I wanted to smile. Instead, my chin trembled. 24 years of silence had suddenly become too heavy for either of us to carry. The wedding coordinator hurried toward her. Lily? Honey, are you feeling okay? She nodded too quickly. Why, yes. But her eyes never left mine. The groom, Ethan, gently took her hand. Are you nervous? She forced a smile that fooled everyone except me. I just need a minute. She bent to pick up the bouquet, but her hands shook so badly that white roses scattered across the floor. Several bridesmaids rushed to help. Guests chuckled softly. Wedding jitters. It happens. Only Lily and I knew this wasn't nerves. This was history walking back into the room. She finally looked away. Without another glance, she walked down the aisle beside the man everyone believed was her father. Richard Carter. The man whose last name she now carried with pride. As she passed each row, people smiled and wiped away happy tears. When she reached the altar, she avoided looking toward the back of the church. She kept her eyes fixed on the minister. As if pretending I wasn't there would make me disappear again. The ceremony began. Dearly beloved. His words floated through the room, but I barely heard them. I was too busy remembering another church. A much smaller one. The day Daniel and I had married. We couldn't afford flowers. My dress had belonged to my older cousin. Daniel's shoes were too big. The photographer forgot to load film into his camera. We had only 3 blurry pictures from our wedding. Daniel laughed the whole way home. Good, he'd said. Now we'll have to remember today with our hearts instead of photographs. I smiled through tears at the memory. He would have loved seeing Lily in her wedding dress. He should have been sitting beside me. Instead, neither of her real parents existed in this room. One was buried beneath white stone. The other had been buried inside a lie. The minister asked everyone to be seated. I lowered myself carefully onto the wooden pew. The old wood creaked louder than I expected. A few people turned around. Then looked away. Just another elderly guest. Nothing more. Halfway through the ceremony, Ethan began reading the vows he had written. Lily, from the day we met, I admired your strength. She smiled faintly. You told me losing your mother taught you to treasure every moment with the people you love. The words struck me like cold rain. Losing your mother. No. She hadn't lost me. She had left me. There is a difference. One is tragedy. The other is choice. Ethan continued. I wish I could have met the woman who gave you life. I know she would be proud of the incredible person you've become. A tear escaped my eye before I could stop it. Proud? Yes. Heartbroken? Even more. The guests smiled. Some quietly dabbed their eyes. Richard Carter reached over and squeezed the hand of the woman sitting beside him. His wife, Margaret. The woman who now carried my name in everyone else's story. She looked kind. Gentle. The sort of woman who probably never imagined another mother still existed. I couldn't hate her. She hadn't stolen my place. She had simply been given it. The ceremony moved on. Then the minister smiled warmly. Before exchanging rings, we'd like to invite the bride's parents to come forward for a blessing. Applause filled the church. Richard and Margaret Carter stood proudly. Lily hugged them both. She held them tightly. The same way she used to hug me after nightmares. The minister placed a hand on their shoulders. You raised a remarkable young woman. I lowered my head. Not because I was ashamed. Because I couldn't bear watching another family receive thanks for a lifetime I had lived. I remembered working double shifts when Lily had pneumonia. Sleeping on a hospital chair for 6 nights. Skipping meals so she could have fresh fruit. Walking 5 miles because bus fare meant buying her school shoes instead. No one in this church knew those stories. Those sacrifices had no witnesses. Motherhood is strange. Some of its greatest victories happen when nobody is watching. The blessing ended. Everyone applauded again. Then something unexpected happened. The minister smiled toward the guests. Before we continue, we'd like to share a short video celebrating Lily's journey. The lights dimmed. A large screen behind the altar lit up. Photographs appeared one after another. Baby Lily. Toddler Lily. School plays. Graduation. Birthdays. Vacations. Christmas mornings. Every picture began after she met the Carters. Nothing before. 20 years of her life had vanished. There was no tiny apartment. No patched-up bicycle. No birthday cake baked in an old oven. No picture of Daniel lifting her onto his shoulders. No photograph of the 3 of us laughing in the rain because we couldn't afford umbrellas. It was as though our lives had never happened. Then the narrator's voice filled the church. Lily lost her beloved mother at the age of 16. My fingers tightened around the little blue gift box resting on my lap. The voice continued. After this heartbreaking tragedy, Richard and Margaret Carter opened their home and became the family she desperately needed. Around me, people sighed. Some quietly wiped away tears. One elderly man whispered to his wife, "God bless those wonderful people." I closed my eyes. For years, I had imagined hundreds of ways I might meet Lily again. Never once had I imagined sitting through a movie where my own death earned applause. The lights came back on. Everyone clapped. Richard looked emotional. Margaret hugged Lily again. Ethan kissed her forehead. Only one person wasn't clapping. Me. Because dead people don't applaud. As the minister prepared to continue, a little girl, no older than 7, slipped away from her parents and wandered toward the back of the church. Children are curious. They notice the things adults ignore. She stopped beside my pew and smiled. Hello. Hello, sweetheart. You've been crying. I laughed softly. I suppose I have. She looked at the blue package in my hands. Is that for the bride? Yes. Are you family? The question hung in the air. I could have lied. Instead, I answered with the only truth I had left. I used to be. The little girl frowned. I don't understand. Before I could answer, her mother hurried over. I'm so sorry. She loves talking to everyone. It's all right. The little girl waved before leaving. As she disappeared into the crowd, I whispered, "Stay little as long as you can." Children love so easily. Adults learn to complicate it. The minister lifted the wedding rings. If anyone here knows of any reason why these 2 should not be joined in marriage. The familiar words echoed through the church. I had no intention of speaking. I hadn't come to ruin my daughter's wedding. I only wanted to see her one last time. But before the minister could continue, Lily suddenly raised her trembling hand. Her voice cracked so loudly that every guest turned toward her. Please. She swallowed hard. I need everyone to wait. The church fell silent again. Then, with tears streaming down her face, she slowly turned and looked directly at the last row. At me. I know who you are. And for the first time in 24 years. My daughter said those words where the whole world could hear. How do you finish saying wedding vows when the woman you told the world was dead is sitting only a few steps away? How do you promise a lifetime of honesty while the biggest lie of your life is staring back at you? No amount of flowers could hide what was about to bloom. No music could drown out the truth. Every pair of eyes followed Lily's gaze. Then they looked toward the last row. Toward me. The old woman with silver hair. The one nobody knew. The one everyone was about to remember. The silence became unbearable. Even the children stopped whispering. Ethan looked confused. Lily. She didn't answer. Her chest rose and fell as if she had forgotten how to breathe. The minister lowered the wedding rings. Is everything all right, my dear? She slowly shook her head. No. One word. Barely louder than a whisper. Yet it echoed through every corner of the church. She looked at me again. Then covered her mouth with trembling fingers. For a moment, I thought she might run. Instead, she took one slow step away from the altar. Then another. Richard Carter gently reached for her arm. Lily? She pulled away. Please, don't. His face filled with concern. What is this? She couldn't answer him. She simply kept walking. Every step toward me seemed heavier than the last. The train of her wedding dress glided behind her like a river of white, while tears rolled down her cheeks faster than she could wipe them away. People moved aside without understanding why. Whispers spread across the church. Who is that woman? Does the bride know her? Is something wrong? Ethan remained standing at the altar, completely lost. I wanted to disappear. I had promised myself I wouldn't interrupt her day. This wasn't how I imagined seeing her again. As Lily reached my pew, she stopped only a few feet away. Neither of us spoke. 24 years of silence stood between us. She searched my face. The wrinkles around my eyes. The silver hair she had never seen. The hands that once braided her hair every morning. Then she whispered. Mom. So softly that only I heard it. One word. The word I had waited nearly a quarter of a century to hear again. My lips trembled. I've missed hearing you say that. Her knees weakened. She sat beside me without caring that hundreds of guests were watching. She looked like a little girl again. Not a bride. Not a successful woman. Just someone's daughter. I'm sorry. She whispered. I'm so sorry. I wanted to hold her. Instead, I simply looked at her. Because I didn't know if I still had that right. She reached for my hand. The same tiny fingers I used to help cross busy streets were now wrapped around mine. Except they weren't tiny anymore. Time had stolen that too. Her tears fell onto our joined hands. They told me you wouldn't come. I frowned gently. Who told you that? She looked down. I didn't invite you. I know. I thought. Her voice broke. I thought it was better. I smiled sadly. For whom? She couldn't answer. Across the church, Ethan slowly walked toward us. His expression wasn't angry. It was frightened. Lily, can someone please tell me what's happening? She stood slowly. Her legs shook. She turned to face him. Then looked around at every guest in the church. Her family. Her friends. Her coworkers. The people who believed they knew her. I have to tell everyone something. Richard Carter stepped forward. Lily, this isn't the time. She looked at him with gratitude. You've loved me like your own daughter. He nodded. We have. And I'll always be thankful. Margaret Carter gently took her husband's hand. Neither of them understood where this was leading. Lily wiped away her tears. Then took a deep breath. The woman sitting there. She pointed toward me. Isn't a family friend. A ripple spread through the church. She isn't a neighbor. People exchanged confused glances. She isn't someone from my childhood. Her voice cracked. She looked at me. Is my mother. The church exploded into whispers. What? I thought her mother died. Didn't the video say? My goodness. The minister removed his glasses. Ethan stared at Lily as if he had never seen her before. Richard Carter closed his eyes. Not in anger. In heartbreak. Lily continued speaking before fear could silence her again. My mother didn't die. No one took her from me. I walked away from her. The whispers stopped. Now there was only silence. The kind that hurts. The kind that forces people to listen. I was ashamed. The words came slowly. Each one heavier than the last. I was ashamed that she cleaned hotel rooms. I was ashamed that our house was small. I was ashamed that my clothes came from thrift stores. Her voice shattered. I was ashamed of the woman who sacrificed everything so I could have a future. A man in the front row quietly lowered his head. Several women wiped tears from their eyes. No one judged. No one interrupted. Lily looked directly at me. You sold your wedding ring so I could buy college books. You skipped meals so I could eat. You worked until your hands bled. I remember all of it. She covered her face. And I spent years pretending I didn't. I felt tears running down my own cheeks. Not because she remembered. Because she had carried those memories all along. She hadn't forgotten. She had buried them. Ethan stepped closer. Lily. She turned toward him. I lied to you. His eyes filled with confusion. You told me your mother passed away. I know. Why? She laughed once. A broken laugh that sounded more like crying. Because it was easier than admitting I abandoned her. The words struck every heart in the room. Ethan looked at me. Then back at Lily. I would have loved her. I know. My parents would have welcomed her. I know. My friends wouldn't have cared. I know. He stepped back. So who were you protecting? Lily couldn't answer. Because there was no answer. Only pride. Only fear. Only the foolish belief that success required forgetting where she came from. Richard Carter finally walked toward me. He removed his jacket despite the warm summer afternoon. Then, to everyone's surprise, he knelt beside my pew. Tears filled his eyes. I owe you an apology. I quickly shook my head. No. Please let me speak. He swallowed hard. When Lily came to us, she was 17. I looked at him in confusion. He continued quietly. She had nowhere to go. She told us you had died. Margaret Carter began crying. We believed her. Richard nodded. She carried one photograph. He reached into his wallet. Carefully. Almost reverently. Then he unfolded an old picture whose edges had turned yellow with age. My breath caught. It was the three of us. Daniel. Little Lily. And me. Standing outside our tiny home. Richard smiled sadly. She kept this hidden in her purse for years. My heart almost stopped. She never threw it away? He shook his head. No. Every birthday, she'd look at it. Every Christmas. Sometimes she'd cry for hours. I looked toward Lily. She couldn't even lift her head. Richard's voice softened. We offered many times to help her find you. She always said. He paused. My mother deserves better than the daughter I became. The words pierced deeper than any accusation ever could. I slowly stood. My knees protested. Age had made walking difficult. But love somehow made it easy. I stepped toward my daughter. She looked so small despite wearing the most beautiful dress in the room. I reached out. Touched her cheek. The same cheek I had kissed before every school exam. Before every birthday. Before every bedtime. She closed her eyes. I don't deserve your forgiveness. No. She opened her eyes, startled. I smiled through my tears. You don't. Her face crumbled. But forgiveness isn't something mothers give because it's deserved. I gently brushed away her tears. It's something we give because love refuses to die. At those words, my daughter collapsed into my arms. She cried with the helplessness of a little girl who had finally found her way home. And for the first time in 24 years, I held my child again. But neither of us noticed that someone else had quietly stepped away from the crowd. A woman in her late 60s. Clutching a worn leather folder so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. She looked at me with recognition. And whispered to herself. It's finally time to tell them what really happened 24 years ago. Sometimes the deepest wound in a family isn't caused by the words people say. It's caused by the truth no one dares to speak. I thought my daughter's confession was the end of our story. I was wrong. It was only the beginning. The church remained silent as Lily cried in my arms. No one hurried us. No one checked the time. For a few precious minutes, the wedding disappeared. There was only a mother. And the little girl she had never stopped waiting for. I stroked her hair gently. You've always cried the same way. She looked up through tears. You remember? I smiled. You're my daughter. You buried your face right here when you scraped your knee learning to ride your bicycle. I touched my shoulder. And when your father died. She let out another sob. And when you failed your first spelling test because you thought you'd disappointed me. A tiny smile broke through her tears. You made me pancakes that night. They were terribly burnt. She laughed despite herself. They really were. I ate every bite. You lied and said they were delicious. They were. They tasted like charcoal. They tasted like love. For the first time that day, a ripple of gentle laughter moved through the guests. Even through the tears, people smiled. Some memories are too beautiful not to smile at. Ethan quietly walked over and stood beside us. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he held out his hand. I'm Ethan. I took it. Margaret. His eyes became wet. I should have met you years ago. I nodded softly. So should I. He looked at Lily. I'm hurt that you lied. I know. But I'm more hurt that you've been carrying this pain alone. Lily whispered, I was afraid. Of what? She took a shaky breath. That if people knew where I came from, they wouldn't respect me. Ethan looked around the church. Look at them. Everyone was watching quietly. No one looked disgusted. No one looked ashamed. Many were crying. A woman in the second row wiped her eyes with both hands. An elderly gentleman removed his glasses to hide his tears. A young waiter standing near the door quietly sniffled before pretending to adjust the decorations. Ethan gently lifted Lily's chin. The only thing that would have made me think less of you. He paused. Was believing you could stop loving the woman who gave you everything. Lily closed her eyes. I know. Just then, the woman holding the worn leather folder slowly walked toward us. She moved carefully, almost hesitating with every step. Richard Carter noticed her first. Mrs. Collins? She nodded. I didn't plan to speak today. Her voice trembled. But I can't stay silent anymore. The minister stepped aside. The guests instinctively made room for her. She stopped in front of me. For a moment, she simply stared. Then tears filled her eyes. I recognize you. I searched her face. The years had changed us both. I'm sorry. I don't. I'm Helen Collins. The name stirred something deep inside me. Then suddenly, I remembered. You were the guidance counselor. She nodded. At Lily's high school. Yes. Lily looked up in surprise. You remember Mrs. Collins? I do. Mrs. Collins opened the leather folder. Inside were yellowed papers tied together with a faded ribbon. I've kept these for 24 years. Lily frowned. What are they? They're the letters. What letters? The ones your mother wrote to you. The church fell completely silent. I stared at the folder. My letters? Mrs. Collins looked at me sadly. You brought one to my office every Friday. My heart skipped. I had almost forgotten. During Lily's last year of high school, after she stopped talking to me, I had written letters and asked the school counselor to pass them along whenever Lily felt ready. Mrs. Collins lowered her head. I never gave them to her. Lily gasped. What? Mrs. Collins closed her eyes. You came into my office one afternoon. She looked at Lily. You were crying. You begged me not to. Lily slowly stepped backward. Mrs. Collins nodded. You said if your classmates discovered your mother worked as a hotel cleaner, your future would be ruined. Lily covered her mouth. I was so frightened. You were. Mrs. Collins continued. I thought I was helping. She looked toward me. I believed giving Lily time would allow her to come back to you. Instead, she held up the bundle of letters. Time became 24 years. She handed them to me with shaking hands. I'm sorry. So terribly sorry. I looked at the faded envelopes. Every one was addressed in my handwriting. To my precious Lily. The ink had faded. But the love hadn't. Lily reached toward them. May I? I nodded. She carefully opened the first envelope. The paper crackled with age. She began reading aloud. My sweetest Lily. Her voice broke instantly. You looked tired when I saw you at school today. I hope you're sleeping enough. I made your favorite apple pie. I couldn't give it to you, but I hope someone fed you dinner tonight. Remember to wear your warm coat. Winter doesn't care how busy college students are. I love you more than yesterday and less than tomorrow. Lily stopped reading. She couldn't continue. Her tears splashed onto the paper. She opened another. My beautiful girl. If you don't want to come home yet, that's all right. Just promise me you're eating breakfast. Another. I found your old teddy bear today. I washed it in case you ever come back. Another. I knitted you a scarf. I hope next winter you're here so I can wrap it around your neck myself. Another. It's your birthday today. I baked your favorite chocolate cake. I accidentally put in too much vanilla because I was thinking about how much you used to laugh when I made mistakes. Another. Christmas feels very quiet without your singing. Another. I know you're angry with me for something I don't understand, but please don't ever believe there is a day when I stop loving you. Lily could barely breathe. She fell to her knees. No. Oh God. No. She hugged the stack of letters against her chest as though trying to recover every lost year at once. I never knew. I never knew. I knelt beside her. You know now. She looked at me with eyes swollen from crying. I thought. She struggled to speak. I convinced myself that after enough time, you'd stopped loving me. I gently cupped her face. My darling. A mother's love doesn't have an expiration date. It simply waits. She buried her face against my shoulder again. I'm so sorry I made you wait so long. I kissed the top of her head. I'd have waited another 24 years. And another 24 after that. Until my last breath. The guests openly wept. Even the photographer lowered his camera. Some moments aren't meant to be captured. They're meant to be felt. Richard Carter quietly approached me. There is one more thing. I looked at him. He reached into his inside pocket. I've been carrying this for years. He handed me a small silver key attached to a faded blue ribbon. I frowned. What is this? Lily rented a storage unit 15 years ago. She looked up suddenly. Oh. Richard nodded. She never had the courage to open it again. He smiled sadly. She told us it contained the only pieces of her old life she couldn't bear to throw away. Lily whispered, almost ashamed. My father's watch. My childhood blanket. The music box. I looked at her in surprise. The music box? She smiled through tears. The one with the little ballerina. I stared at the blue gift still resting on the pew where I had left it. With trembling hands, I picked it up and offered it to her. I brought you another one. She slowly unwrapped the paper. When she opened the lid, the same gentle melody filled the silent church. The tiny ballerina began to spin. Lily let out a broken laugh through her tears. It still plays. I smiled. So does a mother's heart. She threw her arms around me once more. The guests applauded through their tears. But as the beautiful melody echoed through the church, no one noticed an elderly man sitting alone in the very last pew. He quietly removed his hat, wiped away his tears, looked at an old photograph in his wallet, and whispered, Daniel, your girls found each other again. Then he slowly stood, walking toward us with a secret that would change the ending of this day forever. What if I told you that forgiveness doesn't erase the years you lost? It doesn't give you back missed birthdays. It doesn't let you tuck your child into bed one more time. It doesn't bring back the husband who never got to see his daughter become a bride. But forgiveness does something even more beautiful. It gives tomorrow a chance. And sometimes, tomorrow is the greatest gift God leaves in our hands. The elderly man walked slowly toward us, leaning on a polished wooden cane. No one seemed to recognize him except Richard Carter. Richard smiled through his tears. Mr. Williams. The old man nodded politely. I wasn't sure I should come. His voice was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of many years. Lily looked at him, confused. I'm sorry, have we met? He smiled gently. When you were very little. She frowned, trying to remember. He turned toward me. Margaret. I searched his face. Then suddenly. George? He chuckled softly. I've become much older. So have I. George Williams had been Daniel's foreman at the construction company where my husband worked. The last time I had seen him was at Daniel's funeral. He stepped closer and carefully removed an old leather wallet from his coat. From inside it, he unfolded a photograph. It showed Daniel wearing a bright orange construction helmet, laughing beside several coworkers. George touched Daniel's smiling face with one trembling finger. He talked about you every single lunch break. My throat tightened. He did? George nodded. And Lily. A faint smile crossed his face. He carried this picture every day. He turned it over. On the back, in Daniel's familiar handwriting, were the words. Everything I build is for these two girls. My tears blurred the ink. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. George continued. The day before the accident, Daniel asked me something. He looked directly at Lily. He made me promise that if anything ever happened to him, I'd remind his daughter that being rich means nothing if you become poor in love. Lily covered her mouth. George sighed. I searched for you after you left your mother. I found you once. Everyone listened in complete silence. I stood across the street from your university. You looked happy. I wanted to tell you about your father's words. So why didn't you? Lily whispered. George smiled sadly. Because I was a coward. I told myself it wasn't my place. I've regretted that decision every day since. Lily walked over and embraced the old man. You came today. Yes. That's what matters. George smiled. I wasn't going to miss Daniel's little girl getting married. For the first time that afternoon. Lily smiled without forcing it. Then she turned toward the guests. I owe every one of you the truth. She walked back to the altar. Not with the confident steps of a perfect bride. But with the honest steps of a daughter finally laying down the burden she'd carried for years. She took the microphone from the minister. My name is Lily Brooks. She paused. Not Lily Carter. She turned toward Richard and Margaret Carter. I love you both with all my heart. Richard smiled proudly. You'll always be our daughter. She nodded through tears. And I will always be grateful that you gave me a home when I didn't deserve one. Margaret walked over and kissed Lily's forehead. You always deserved love. Lily continued. But today. She looked at me. I want the world to know the woman who truly made me who I am. She stretched out her hand toward me. Mom. I hesitated. She smiled through tears. Please. My legs felt weak as I walked toward her. The entire church stood. No one remained seated. When I reached the altar, Lily gently took both of my hands. She faced the guests. This woman cleaned hotel rooms. She looked at me with pride. She scrubbed floors. She washed dishes. She stitched clothes until her fingers bled. So I could stand here today. She wiped away another tear. I spent years pretending her sacrifices embarrassed me. Her voice became stronger. Today I understand they were the greatest acts of love anyone has ever shown me. The church erupted into applause. Not polite applause. The kind that comes from hearts that have been changed. Some people were crying too hard to clap properly. Others smiled through streams of tears. The sound seemed to last forever. Lily reached into her bouquet. Hidden among the white roses was a folded place card. She handed it to the wedding coordinator. Would you help me? The young woman nodded. Within minutes, the front row was rearranged. One chair was placed directly beside the groom's family. The coordinator smiled warmly. This seat has your name on it. I looked down. Written in elegant gold letters were the words. Mother of the bride. I could no longer hold back my tears. I don't deserve this. Lily gently squeezed my hands. No. You deserved it 24 years ago. I was simply too blind to see it. She led me to the chair herself. Every guest watched as I sat where I should have been all along. The front row. The place my little girl had once promised I'd always have. Before returning to the altar, Lily suddenly remembered something. She hurried back to me. What is it? I asked. She smiled through happy tears. You never got to help me. Help you with what? She laughed. The way you dreamed about since I was little. Without another word. She turned around. Lifted her long veil. And placed its edge into my trembling hands. I've waited my whole life for my mother to straighten my wedding veil. My fingers shook so badly I could barely smooth the delicate fabric. I don't want to ruin it. You couldn't. I carefully adjusted the veil the way I had imagined doing countless nights while sitting alone in my little house. When I finished, I kissed her forehead. Exactly as I had done on her first day of school. On every birthday. On every Christmas morning. Some habits are too precious to lose. You look beautiful. She smiled. I look like your daughter. You always did. The ceremony began again. This time, when the minister asked who gave the bride in marriage, Lily answered before anyone else could. My father gave me courage. She looked toward the heavens. My mother gave me everything else. The church fell silent once more. Even the minister wiped his eyes. The vows were exchanged. The rings were placed. The promises were made. When the minister finally smiled and said, "You may kiss the bride," the church filled with joyful laughter and applause. But before Ethan kissed Lily, he looked at me. "May I?" I laughed through tears. "You've been waiting long enough." Everyone laughed with us. For the first time that day, the laughter carried no pain. Only hope. After the ceremony, photographers gathered everyone outside beneath the warm afternoon sun. "Family first," one photographer called. Without hesitation, Lily wrapped one arm around me and the other around Richard and Margaret Carter. "All of my parents." The photographer smiled. "Perfect." Just before the camera flashed, Lily whispered so quietly that only I could hear, "I'm coming home." I looked at her. "You already have." Months later, she and Ethan visited every Sunday. Sometimes they cooked dinner in my little kitchen. Sometimes we simply sat on the porch watching the sunset. She laughed at my old stories. I spoiled them with too much dessert. The house that had once echoed with silence became full again. One rainy afternoon, Lily carried a small box down from my attic. Inside were the 24 birthday presents I had wrapped but never given. She opened every single one. She cried over every letter. She wore the scarf I had knitted years before. She hung the childhood drawing on my living room wall. And every Christmas after that, she insisted on wrapping one extra present. "For who?" I asked the first year. She smiled. "For every year we lost." One evening, as we watched her little daughter dance around the living room with the music box I had given Lily on her wedding day, my granddaughter looked up at her mother and asked, "Mommy, who's the nicest person you've ever known?" Lily didn't hesitate. She looked at me. The same way she had when she was 5 years old. With love. With pride. With no shame. Then she smiled and said, "My mom." I looked out the window toward the evening sky. The clouds had turned golden. For just a moment, I imagined Daniel smiling. Not because our daughter had become successful. Not because she had married a good man. But because she had finally remembered the one thing he always hoped she never would forget. A mother's love can be ignored. It can be hidden. It can even be declared dead. But if it is real, it never stops waiting at the door, hoping one day its child will find the way back home.